We are live.
All right. We are back in action for another Game of the Week preview. You already know what it is. Make sure to hit that thumbs up button for your boys. Make sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so. Make sure to support our sponsor, Underdog Fantasy. Use that promo code KFTV to get up to $1,000 in instant bonus cash and get a free pick. And look, guys, we're getting ready for the Knicks starting their West Coast trip out in Phoenix. And who better to help me preview this game is none other than Gerald Bourguet, all right, lead Suns writer for Phoenix Sports and the co-host of Phoenix Suns. All right, you can go find him over at PHNX Sports over there to make sure, give him a follow, make sure to support the channel. Gerald, how you doing, man? How you feeling today? What's going on?
I'm doing great. I'm doing better than our fan base is currently doing amidst their recent skid, but I am doing great personally. How about you?
I'm doing well. I want first to say congratulations to you and the missus on, expecting a baby. So just want to say congratulations to you first and foremost, my guy.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Some life-changing news in the middle of the start of a new season. So I'm about to be tired in a whole different way than life as a beat reporter, but I'm excited for it.
Hey, man, it's a good thing. It's a blessing. And just enjoy
hmm
the journey. I'll say this. The one thing I did not expect is a lot of boxes. So make sure that you're breaking them all down. And that is like the one thing that is the most aggravating thing is just breaking down boxes. But we're not here to talk about breaking down boxes and talking about our children. We got a game to cover, man. And before I ask you about the Phoenix Suns and how that team's going on. I got to get your thoughts on the New York Knicks so far. What has been your thoughts on them so far this season?
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously the offensive end, there's a lot of firepower there now. And I think the questions on the defensive end, especially with Cat manning that five spot, are pretty clear. I think over the last couple of games, they've really started to build in the right direction. Obviously, you look at the slate of opponents they had, it hasn't been world beaters by any means, but that's good for a team that has quite a few new pieces to kind of figure things out on both ends of the court. And so you can see how that sort of thing can spiral. And that's why I'm kind of fascinated by this game because, you've got a Knicks team that's strung together a few wins now, starting to build some confidence there against a Suns team that is heading in the opposite direction after their 8-1 start. They've been missing Kevin Durant for the last 6 games. They're 1-5 over that stretch. They've been missing Bradley Beal for the last four. They're missing him for this game as well.
Mm.
So it's interesting because the Suns need a win in the worst way. And the Knicks, you look at their wins, they haven't beaten anybody that's been really good yet. So I think this is a great test for both teams in terms of where they're currently at, whether the Suns can dig their way out of this kind of pit that they're in right now, and whether the Knicks can continue to build with probably one of their best wins of the season.
For sure. I wouldn't say the win against the Wizards is their best win of the season, but I do like what I'm seeing from them right now, just stringing together three wins in a row after this team is like they won, then they lose one, then they win, then they lose one, and then they win, then they lose two. You can't keep jockeying back and forth of where you're trying to be, especially when you came in with all this hype of being, one of the most prolific offensive teams that we've seen, potentially one of the best starting fives in the NBA. There's a lot of hype to live up to. And so I'm looking for this team to continue building in the right direction because, as you noted, look, it's a whole new starting five. They all got to just kind of get their bearings, get familiar with how each other plays and where they're going to be on the court at all times. So it takes some time to gel. The one thing for me is just the defense. I need to see that defense be a lot better. When you lose, when you don't have Mitchell Roberts, I should say, you don't have Precious Achua, even without Deuce McBride for the last couple of games, your defense does take a little hit. And with the designated wing stop, it's been up and down. Now they did play well the last few games, but it's also against, lesser end talent. It is the Brooklyn Nets, it is the Washington Wizards that we're talking about here. We're not talking about any world beating teams, but I want to see them how they're going to compete against a Phoenix Suns team that's looking to make some noise after, making the trades that they have in the past, acquiring, I should say, the players in Beal and Kevin Durant to pair next to Devin Booker and, have championship aspirations as this Knicks team moving forward. So it should be a good one for tomorrow. Where do you expect this Knicks team to end I guess, this year? Like when you heard the Cat and Bridges trade, seeing them through a first couple of games, knowing that they have to gel, where do you expect this team to end?
Yeah, I mean, before the season, I would have said second in the East, right behind the Boston Celtics. I actually really liked a lot of what they did. Obviously being a Suns guy, I was high on the Mikal Bridges acquisition, but I also liked the Cat trade. I think obviously losing DiVincenzo hurt a little bit in that respect, but I liked the potential firepower that he was going to bring. Obviously, you guys haven't been fully healthy yet or aren't fully healthy right now. So I think that's been impacting it a little bit. Um, but now I'm kind of like, okay, so is it second or third? Because I wasn't expecting the Cavs to get off to a 15-0 start this season. They kind of came out of nowhere as a pseudo contender. I'm not sure I'm 100% fully bought in. I really like Kenny Atkinson, and obviously what he's been able to do with Cleveland. So I think they're kind of in that tier right underneath Boston, like Cleveland, New York, maybe Orlando, depending on how they can continue to do with Paolo Banchero out. But yeah, I do think they're a legitimate challenge for Boston. I think it's going to be hard for anyone to beat the Celtics 4 out of 7 times in a series. But I do think the Knicks, once they kind of get acclimated and everything, are going to be a lot better than what we've seen in terms of this 8-6 start.
And speaking about the rankings of the teams that you just mentioned, you have Boston and Cleveland playing tonight. There's 34 seconds left in this game. We got Boston up 116 with Cleveland uh down by with 109. And so, they're Cleveland's making a name for themselves. It's interesting how they were able to come back in the third and make a competitive game out of it. But, I would say I agree with you. I'm going to pencil them at number two just because the Celtics are just, you got to give respect to the reigning champs.
Mhm.
And just how they started off the season so far. I mean, yes, they've lost a couple of games, but the way they're able to shoot, the way they're able to defend, the way they're able to play make, it's just a tough team to go against. But, you know, it's just watching any team, like how are they able to progress along the season, seeing if they can't keep up with the reigning champs. But enough about the Knicks. I need to know about the Phoenix Suns now. So you guys are coming in here with championship aspirations. You guys got off to a hot start. You're now on a 4-game skid. What's the pulse over in Phoenix, Phoenix Nation?
Ooh, I mean, here in the Valley, it's Chicken Little Central, if you ask the fan base. Like the sky is falling, blow the team up. The 8-1 start is a thing of the past. It feels like years ago. For me, I'm just kind of like, you built your team around a big three, and you haven't had two of your big three in what, 4 of the last 6 games. You haven't had Kevin Durant, your best player, in all 6 of those games. And you look at the gauntlet they've had to face, man. Like they played every other day since the start of November with 2 back-to-backs thrown in, 10 games in 17 days, I think. They've faced the number one defense with the Thunder, the number one defense from last year with the Timberwolves, and the number two defense from this year with the Magic in their last 3 games. And, Devin Booker has been hit with double teams, blitzes, every defensive coverage you can imagine over these handful of games because opponents are just going to sell out to get the ball out of his hands without KD there, without Bradley Beal there, and it's working. Like, Book has really struggled outside of the Minnesota game when he dropped 44 to kind of get in a rhythm because, on the ball he's getting blitzed every pick and roll, off the ball he's getting held, they're roughing him up, they're playing physical, which is what you want to do in these circumstances. So the Suns have got to find a way to kind of get him free up, get him in a rhythm, and get other guys to make shots because before this recent skid, the Suns were, I think, seventh in three-point percentage. They've been top 10 in three-point percentage the last 4 years running. They just weren't getting up the number of attempts. And over this skid, guys have just really missed a ton of shots. I think they're shooting around 30% from three, maybe worse than that over this stretch. They've fallen all the way to like middle of the pack in three-point percentage on the season because of this stretch. So the Suns are definitely desperate for a win to kind of get back up on the horse here and maybe not go 1-8 with Kevin Durant sideline by the time he comes back, whenever that'll be.
Oh man, so do you think they have enough with what's on the roster right now to get Booker those open shots that you're talking about? Because, you know, I feel like there is a drop off when you're not having Kevin Durant and Bradley Beal out there. And so you think that this team is capable of doing that because we've seen Booker, especially when he first started there, it was just him and it was just tough to get shots. Then you
Mm.
get eight and you get Chris Paul. And then it's like, oh, look at this, solid foundation. You have Bridges out there as well. Do you think they have that right now to like man this ship until Kevin Durant and Beal get back?
I think they can. I think they very much need a break because, like I said, the schedule's been nonstop. The last 3 opponents they've faced have all had really good defenders or really good defenses to make life hell for Book. I think the Knicks are still working on things defensively, obviously, especially with Cat coming into the fold. So I do think the Suns will probably be able to generate a little bit more momentum for Book than we've seen in the last couple weeks against, the elite defenses of the league. But I do think a lot of it comes down to other guys making shots because opponents are not going to think twice about doubling Book if, Tyus Jones goes 1 for 6 from three, or Ryan Dunn goes 1 for 9, which he did against the Thunder, or Royce O'Neal, who's just been in an absolute rut since Kevin Durant went out, even though he was
Mm.
shooting a career high like 44% from three before that. So they need their other guys to step up and hit shots because I'm sure the Knicks will do something similar in terms of trying to get the ball out of Devin Booker's hands. I think they do have enough, and I think just playing a defense that's not quite as good as the elite tier that we've seen over the last week will help them. But they've definitely been in a rut, and it's starting to kind of show through in the body language. They're a little demoralized right now, so I'm curious to see what kind of energy they come out with against this Knicks team, especially now that they're back home for a little bit of time coming off their last 4 game road trip.
And this is going to be the challenge for the Knicks. Thankfully, they're playing a Suns team that's, this is the first matchup against, the Suns team, first trip on the road. So, they're going to be a little bit more fresh. Better than when you're on the fifth game of a long road trip. Then you're like, yo, I'm just ready to get home. I miss my family. I want to get back in my own bed. Like, I'm done with this. So I'm looking at this game, right? And I'm seeing that, that with this, well, I should say, let me walk that back. I'm looking at this team, not this game, because when I see that it's fully healthy and KD and Beal is out there, this can be a very dynamic team. Obviously, the injury concerns are there. What are your feelings about this team? Is this a team that's going to make it to the NBA Finals? Is this a team that's going to, have that opportunity, or is there still, because I know you're hearing from the fan base, blow it up. This is it. We're done, as you already mentioned. But part of that is due to like the injury history, and the injury history is already starting off, very early in the season.
Yeah, no, I think it's more reflective of the PTSD that this fan base has, especially after last season. Like this team won 49 games last season, and it was the most miserable 49 win season that I can remember because the whole time guys were in and out of the lineup, especially Bradley Beal and the big three. I think they only wound up playing 40 games together. So there's a lot of fear that what we're seeing this season is going to be a duplicate of last season. For me, I think if they are, it's the same as when they first paired these guys together. Like if they're healthy, if the big three are healthy at the right time of year, I think this team can compete with anybody. Do I have them slotted ahead of like the Oklahoma City Thunder to win the West? Not right now. I need to see more, but I do think when they were healthy for those first 9 games, you saw the blueprint. You saw a team that was taking way more threes than last year, that was committing way fewer turnovers than last year, that was executing way better in the fourth quarter than they did last year, which they were one of the worst teams since NBA.com started tracking fourth quarter net rating in that category, which was absolutely insane for a team with the talent that it had to be like that. But Bud has come in, he's put in a structure, he's allowed them to play and kind of freewheel it out there, but also they have set principles that they want. It's just more organized. We saw Kevin Durant taking over in crunch time. I think they were 7-0 in the clutch over those first 9 games. So I do put more stock in that start that I saw than what I've seen over the last couple of weeks. But yeah, like if one or two of these guys is out, especially come playoff time, they're not going to reach their goals. And that's just kind of the risk that you take when you construct your roster this way and go all in on a big three like this.
Salute to Knicks Nation. Thank you all for tuning in for another game of the week preview. With me on the other side is my guy, Gerald Bourguet. You can find him covering the Phoenix Suns. He's the lead Phoenix Suns writer for PNHNX Sports out there. And you can find him as the co-host for PHNX Suns. They say pronounce all of it, right? Because it's all caps at that point.
Yeah,
You got to
yeah.
say each and every single one.
Yep.
Because I'm looking at it as like Phoenix. I just, because I know there's like other branches like Philly and so forth. So I'm like,
Mm.
how do you like to pronounce it? So just want to make sure. Make sure you hit that thumbs up button for your boys. Make sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so. And make sure to support our sponsor, Underdog Fantasy. Use that promo code KFTV. Gerald, you got a new coach this year. You went from Frank Vogel to Budenholzer. So do you see that as an upgrade? What are your thoughts about that coaching change?
I think so far it's been a very significant upgrade. And I think in some ways Frank Vogel was scapegoated a little bit for the struggles of this team last year. But I do think by the end of the year, the locker room had kind of lost faith in him. And we saw that in the Clippers game that happened a couple of games before the end of the regular season. They were down like 35-4 at one point in the first quarter of that game. And it was a game they needed to have in terms of potential seeding. And they just came out and got smacked by a Clippers team that was missing I can't remember if it was Paul George or Kawhi Leonard, but one of the two. It was awful. And I think at that moment, it was kind of like everybody loved Frank. He's a great guy, but in terms of being the guy to hold the leaders accountable, hold everybody to a certain standard, and have a strategy and a structure for them to succeed, I think they lost faith in it. So I think you had to make a change. And I love what Budenholzer has come in here and done so far. They're taking threes like a good shooting team should take threes in the modern NBA. They're playing a little bit faster. They're turning the ball over less. They're executing in fourth quarters. They really have structurally addressed a lot of the weaknesses that they had last year. And I think the Suns have a slightly better roster than they have last year in terms of their depth and the pieces they have around the main cast. But yeah, Budenholzer has been an upgrade in my book, even if their records through 15 games are the exact same as last year. I think that's more so due to Beal and Durant missing time than anything else.
And what would you say, like, I guess philosophically, coaching wise, what has been the biggest difference from Vogel to Budenholzer?
Yeah, I think Budenholzer puts a big emphasis on playing random, that phrase that came up during his time in Milwaukee. But
Hmm.
it's a big, like, they have their core tenets. They had, like, he's a guy that tapes boxes, to five spots on the floor all around the 3-point line to designate where they should ideally be starting a possession. There should be a player inside each one of those boxes to spread the floor out. So they definitely want to get up more threes. And they have been doing that, but I think he empowers them to, like, yes, we have sets, we obviously have plays, every team does, but I want you to have the freedom to, ad lib and make decisions and just play basketball, which is something that I think caters to Kevin Durant specifically because he always talks on Twitter about how, we're not robots out there just running plays over and over. We got to be able to hoop at the same time too. So I think Budenholzer is a really good marriage between providing way more structure than the Suns had last year under Vogel so that they feel comfortable in what they're doing, but also giving players and empowering them that freedom to kind of, make reads for themselves, think for themselves, and just go out there and play.
Okay, so a little bit more like, I guess, less structure in order to create a better free flowing offense for what Kevin
Mhm.
Durant and the rest of the guys like. It's very interesting. And defensively, because both of them are defensive coaches. Like that's
Mhm.
where they, make their bread and butter. So have you seen the defense take a massive step forward with Budenholzer at the helm?
Yeah, I don't know about massive, but I do think, especially when they were healthy, like it was actually their defense that was kind of holding things down for them instead of their offense. When you have that much firepower and that much talent to kind of sort through, and especially three mid-range guys trying to get them to buy into taking more threes, that was a little bit of a process. But I think defensively, like Yusuf Nurkic was a lot better than I expected on the defensive end of the ball.
Mm.
Offensively, he's been a real struggle. And they've got Bradley Beal, who's been taking on, primary defensive assignments, chasing guys all over the court. Kevin Durant had a tremendous defensive season last year and was carrying that over as well. So it feels like defensively they've been very good. They mostly do drop coverage, but they haven't been afraid to go small to close games when Nurk has been struggling with KD at the five, throwing Ryan Dunn out there or Royce O'Neal out there, some small ball lineups. So obviously, you don't have a lot of that with Beal out, with KD out, with guys struggling. So I'm curious to see how they approach this matchup with Cat, who is a stretch big, something the Suns have struggled with. Nurk is questionable heading into this game. So there's a lot up in the air in terms of how the Suns are going to play defensively against this Knicks team.
Okay. Now I'm gonna pivot to a different question because I have to bring up this Brian Windhorst commentary about the parallel between what the Knicks did this offseason and what the Suns did, past offseason, right? When they traded for KD, got Beal. And he talked about how the roster is not fully set with everybody that they need until year two. And he used the Phoenix Suns as that comp. And so as a Knicks fan, and especially with the new structure of the CBA.
Mhm.
Did you see that happen this year? Did you see like a big upgrade in the players that the Suns were able to bring to surround Kevin Durant, Devin Booker, and Bradley Beal to really, hone in on what their strengths are? Or do you feel like it's a marginal upgrade and it's only marginal because of how the CBA is?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it is a big upgrade in terms of what the Suns needed specifically, but looking, broad strokes, it's probably more of a marginal thing. But going out there and getting a starting caliber point guard with Tyus Jones on a vet minimum deal was a huge win for the Suns. And I thought them getting Monte Morris on a vet minimum deal was a good pickup. But to be able to get two point guards when you really struggled with turnovers, get the two leaders in assist to turnover ratio in the NBA over the last 5 years, getting both of them, that's a huge upgrade for them. I really liked what they did in the draft. Ryan Dunn has been tremendous, even though he's kind of hit a shooting skid recently. And Oso Ighodara's come in and given them good minutes with Nurk kind of in and out of the lineup there. So I think they've done a nice job of supplementing their depth. And I think it's possible for the Knicks to follow suit because I do think with the new CBA, with the second tax apron and all this other stuff, that really makes it difficult for teams to add to their talent. It's hard to do that overnight in one off season. I think the Knicks added some great pieces, but obviously still some holes to plug up. And I think you have a better chance of doing that in your second year, like we saw with the Suns, than you do in trying to fit it all in one summer, basically.
Yeah, and that's kind of where I was trying to get at because, I'm looking at the bench. I mean, the starting five is what the starting five is. I don't see that changing. Even going into a following season, I think Tibbs loves Josh Hart. I think he's there in the starting rotation to stay. Obviously, you want to use Cat. The whole premise is to have like a spread five offense, right? You want your center to be able to stretch the floor. And then you're not sitting Bridges after what you trade for him. You're not sitting OG for what you paid him. And then
Mhm.
obviously Brunson's going to be slotted in there. And so it's, Deuce McBride, awesome. Precious solid when he plays. Mitchell Robinson is awesome. Obviously, there's some health concerns there. I guess for me, it's just who's that next guy that you're looking at to really just, who's going to be that guy to like really step up and help this bench unit take it to another level.
Mhm.
So is that going to be something internally that we're watching for? Because like, look, we got highs for Tyler Kolek, Ariel Hekporti, we got Dadier that's starting to get some Hive members as well now and it's starting to grow. And we see these rookies start to shine in small minutes, small moments. You're like, oh, I can see the vision will be next year that they do it. So there's some like I want to see like essentially I just want to make sure that what Brian Windhorst is saying is accurate. That's all I'm trying to do here, man. Because look, we got championship aspirations. We want to make
Mhm.
sure that we reach them. But before we get into this matchup, Gerald, last thing is the Suns team like what is the expectations for the Suns team? I is it championship or bust? Like, because there's like when you watch a team, it's obviously you want to win a championship every year. That's the main goal, no doubt about it. But obviously, there's also years where you got to build up to that. You got to get your wounds before you can actually, get to the mountaintop. So do the Suns have a short window? Does it have to be this year? What's the expectation?
I think this year might be their best chance. And I say that not really knowing what's going to become of the Celtics in the next year or so, because they're still probably my pick to win it all. And I think the Thunder are my pick to win the West. But I do think in terms of if you're looking at their window, when they first assembled Bradley Beal and Kevin Durant with Devin Booker here, you knew it was probably like a 1, 2, maybe 3 year window. I think this is their best opportunity. Year one is usually about trying to figure it all out and they just didn't have the injury luck that they needed to kind of build the requisite chemistry for a playoff run. And then we saw what happened in the playoffs because of that. I think this year they have a better coach in place, they have a better system, they have better depth. Hopefully, these last couple weeks are just a blip on the radar, and they'll have better health as well to allow them to build over the course of a full season. Um, I don't know if they're legitimate title contenders. I really liked what I saw over the first 9 games, but small sample size and an injury can easily throw all that out the window, as we've seen. So I think this is their best opportunity. I think they might have maybe one more year after this with this current core before you really have to kind of consider retooling and building around Devin Booker, maybe Kevin Durant in a different way. So that is the encouraging thing if you're a Knicks fan looking at the situation is like year one, you're trying to figure it out. You're assessing what are the holes that we need to plug the following summer where because like you mentioned, your starting five is set. You guys are stacked in that regard. It's all about plugging the holes from there. I think the Suns are a good example of how it can look when it goes well in terms of they had to plug a hole in their starting lineup, you would argue, with bringing in a starting point guard. They were able to do it, but the Knicks just have to plug in some bench holes to my eye. So I think that's an encouraging thing if you're a New York fan.
For sure, absolutely. And I guess, since you're essentially saying, you got 3 years, this is year two, you got one more year with the Suns. What's the concern about Devin Booker? Because there's always going to be star hunting. Everyone's going to be talking about, oh, he's on the move, this, that, and the third. What's the fear there? Because KD, excellent talent, but
Mhm.
like you see it, injury is going to catch up. Who knows when he's going to be done. Beal, he's a good option, but like he's not really the guy you build around. We already saw that experiment. Devin Booker, on the other hand, that's like he's Suns Nation through and through, man. Drafted there, been doing it. Yeah, look, man, we were all here for when it was just thinking that it was just empty points. A guy who was just getting a lot of stats because there was nobody else on this team, but proved everybody wrong. So is there any concern there? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's a great question because it's really going to depend on how the next season or two unfolds and what the level of frustration is like if they fall short of their goal of winning a title. Because they are, I mean, you look at their payroll, you look at the aggression of the front office and the new owner, you look at the pieces that they brought in, they're very much all in on trying to win with this group here and now. They're pushing all their chips to the middle of the table there. So if they come up short, what is the reaction going to be like? Is Devin Booker still going to have faith that, this new ownership group, this new front office is going to finally be able to get him over the hump before the prime of his career is over? And I truthfully can't answer that right now. I do believe that, it's funny always seeing Stephen A go up here and say Devin Booker wants to go to the Knicks. I'm sorry if there are any Knicks fans listening that believe that. Devin Booker wants to be in Phoenix. He wants to win in Phoenix. That's been very important to him because he looks at guys like Kobe and Dirk and all these guys that stayed with one organization throughout their entire tenure, that won
Mm.
championships that mean everything to that organization. And I think he knows that he could have a chance to be that for the Suns. And he's always talked about wanting to bring the super team to him. And he's done that a couple of times. He brought Chris Paul here, Kevin Durant, Bradley Beal. Like guys are going to want to come and play in Phoenix. So even if this current iteration doesn't work out, this ownership group is still going to be aggressive. They are not going to rebuild. They're going to retool until the day Devin Booker comes to them and says, I want out. So I don't know if that day will come after this current iteration, if it flames out. But I do think for Book, winning here has always been important. So even if this doesn't flame out, as long as the ownership group has a plan in place that he will, sign off on, I think he might wind up being a Sun for life.
Salute to Knicks Nation. Thank you all for tuning for another game of the week preview. With me on the other side is my guy Gerald Bourget. You can go follow him on Twitter, follow him on all social media platforms. He's the lead Suns writer for PHNX Sports and PHNX Suns. That's where you can find the podcast and find him as a co-host, covering all things Phoenix Suns over there, and does a great job as well. So make sure to support him. Make sure to also support this channel. Make sure that thumbs up button for your boys. Make sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so, and make sure to support our sponsor, Underdog Fantasy. Use that promo code KFTV to get up to $1,000 in instant bonus cash and a free pick. And guys, look, I love Underdog Fantasy. It's a lot of fun. Before every single game, I like to go up and down the slate and just choose, anybody from the NBA, whatever games are happening that night, and put together a good, 4 to maybe even 6 players that I think are going to hit, whether it be higher or lower on points, rebounds, assists, whatever the category may be. And you know what? If I'm feeling a little frisky and it's like a Sunday and there's some NFL going on, I may throw an NFL player in there as well because, I'm going to choose anybody but the New York Jets. Actually, you know what? Let me tell you, I might actually start choosing the New York Jets now after they just fired Joe Douglas because they are not going to hit the higher on anything. So make sure if you're going to choose that team, everything lower, God knows we're not going to see anything on that, anything positive on that front. But yeah, look, make sure to support our sponsor, Underdog Fantasy. Use that promo code KFTV to get up to $1,000 in instant bonus cash and a free pick. And it's just so simple, guys. Just choose higher or lower on any statistical category. And it's just that easy. And maybe you will win some money. But make sure to use that promo code KFTV to get up to $1,000 in instant bonus cash and a free pick. All right, let's get back to it. All right, man, we got a matchup tomorrow between the Knicks and the Suns, and there's some interesting statistical categories I want to go through because these categories, whether it be point, was it scoring off of turnovers, second chance points, points in the paint, these are big areas that I like to look at because I think this is what dictates games for the most part. And just looking just from what the Suns do and what the Knicks do, they're not too far off in any of these categories. I know
Mhm.
it's very early, Both these teams are going through injuries. Both these teams are just trying to get their bearings, but they're very close. But the one thing that always stands out to me is, will the Knicks just beat their opposing team when it comes to fast break points? This is a slow paced team. I know they don't like to get out and really run much, but when they do, when they beat the other team, more often than not, they do win. However, the Knicks rank 27th when it comes to fast break points, and the Suns ranked in 18th. Now, this is where it could get interesting, is that the Knicks are right now, when it comes to stopping opponents from scoring in fast break points, they're fifth, with the Phoenix Suns being 12th. So this is where it's going to be very interesting for tomorrow's game and who's going to get the advantage over here. What do you think about that category?
Yeah, I think I think part of the fast breaks, especially for the Suns last year, was they were gifting opponents fast breaks because of all the live ball turnovers. Like if you commit a turnover and throw it out of bounds, the play is dead, you get to set your defense. Okay, that's fine, that happens. But they committed so many live ball turnovers that they basically just were giving up pick sixes left and right. And so that's something that I'm keeping an eye on in this matchup is OG Anunoby has given Devin Booker problems in the past. He's a long, lengthy defender. Mikal Bridges, same thing. If those guys are able to get out into the passing lanes, make life hell on Book, generate some turnovers, that can kind of breathe life into a fast break attack that otherwise isn't that great. But it is something to keep an eye on because the Suns have been wanting to play faster, but one thing that's really hurt them over these last 6 games is when, defenses are sending two to the ball on Devin Booker, that slows things down. That puts you in more of a half court game. So they really haven't been able to play at the pace that they like to play at and that they are aspiring to play at this season under Bud. So definitely something I'm keeping an eye on in that respect. The other one for me is points in the paint because it feels like the Suns have gotten beat up in that category quite a bit this season.
Yeah, and look, this is why I'm hoping that the Knicks can get out there and do that. And you talked about OG, guarding Devin Booker well. I'm curious to see how that matchup goes. I kind of think it's going to be Bridges, just because looking at who you played last night, you played two centers
Yeah.
in your starting rotation, and I, strength wise, Bridges isn't in that category. OG is. OG is a guy
Mhm.
that you want to put on the block when it comes to facing Plumlee, or is it Eagle
Iguodala.
Dar
Yeah.
Iguodaro?
I
Yeah.
and I am curious about if they stick with the dual big lineup. They've done it the last 2 games, and I think it's a way to have an additional solid screen setter off the ball to try and free Devin Booker up a little bit against the defenses that they've seen. And also just because they were going up against bigger, like Minnesota, obviously they had Randall and they had Gobert, so they wanted to match with some size out there. I am
Hmm.
curious if against the Knicks they stick with the dual big lineup. And it might depend on whether Nurk plays or not, but if they veer away from it, yeah, I think Bridges will still get most of that assignment. But knowing the types of coverages that Book might see, we'll probably see some of him, Anunoby, Josh Hart on him in stretches for sure.
Absolutely. Now here's the statistical category that I'm really, very happy for, and then when it comes to a Knicks advantage, and it comes to points in the paint.
Mhm.
Knicks right now, they're currently ranked 12th when it comes to scoring points in the paint. They're averaging about 49 points. Suns, they are, just so I got it correctly, they are dead last when it comes to points in the paint, averaging 40. Now, when it comes to preventing the opponents from scoring the points in the paint, Knicks rank 10th, at limiting them to 46. So, you know, they're up there being a
Mhm.
decent team. They do get some leeway just because Cat, not the greatest defender, but there is some decent, like, solid rim protection, especially with Jericho, who's been playing a little bit better as of recent. Phoenix ranks 17th, allowing opponents to average 50 points in the paint. This is where I'm excited for the Knicks, man, just because
Mhm.
this is a team that likes to get downhill. We're watching Towns work the block. Guys like OG has been getting dunks left and right and is just a legitimate cutter. Even guys like even Mikal Bridges and Josh Hart, they like to cut as well, and they've been getting their scoring mojo going in the paint as well. This is where I'm looking for the Knicks to really thrive in tomorrow's matchup.
Yeah, I think if you look at the Suns over the course of this season, they've been routinely beat in points in the paint. And I think it's because the trade-off for them is we're going to take a lot of threes and hopefully beat you from behind the line. And some nights they've been able to do that, and some nights they really haven't. So I think for me that the 3-point battle and the points in the paint battle are kind of intertwined there in this one because I know the Knicks don't take a ton of attempts, but they're one of the more efficient 3-point shooting teams in the NBA. So if the Suns aren't able to be efficient despite getting up a number of threes, they're not going to be able to counter what the Knicks do, especially, Towns has a size advantage, a skill advantage at his size over, whether the Suns are trotting out Nurk, Mason Plumlee, or the rookie Iguodaro, he's going to have that advantage, and they have, these bigger wings and Mikal Bridges, OG Anunoby. So I think for the Knicks, the emphasis has to be getting downhill, getting into the paint. We know Jalen Brunson can get to his spots in the mid-range at any point in time. So it's going to be a tough assignment for the Suns in this game, especially being shorthanded, because they don't really have the horses that they normally have on their 3-point attack to kind of balance out, the discrepancy they usually face in points in the paint.
Yeah, and I'm also curious to see how the Knicks attack from there as well. I mean, the Knicks have been very efficient, just scoring field goal percentage. Their threes have been up and down, but
Mm,
when they're going, they're drilling them, man. So, looking at the 3-point percentage right now, the Knicks are they're third right now, averaging 38, close to essentially 39%, with the Suns averaging. Just give me a second as my screen just decided to freeze on me. Suns are 13th right now.
mm,
When it comes to shooting the three, they're averaging 37% from downtown. So that they can easily be there could easily be a shootout from behind the arc. Now, when it comes to like attempts and so forth, Knicks are 21st. So
right.
if they decide to go that route, that would be very nice to see. But I think with points in the paint, that's where they're going to live. Suns, they're putting up way more attempts. They're third right now when it comes to attempts
Mm,
from three. So we'll see how that all plays out in tomorrow's game. But besides like shooting threes, points in the paint, stuff of that nature, there is a key matchup that I'm looking at in this one.
mm,
And if the Suns decide to go two bigs tomorrow, we're not going to see OG on Devin Booker. And so that's
mm.
why, and I think that's what's going to happen. And so that's why I'm going with revenge game for one Mikal Bridges, him and Devin Booker as the guys that are going to be matching up. That is my key matchup for tomorrow's game. Look, Bridges been out in Phoenix. He was there for a long time. That's where he started his career. He was right there with Devin Booker. So, he knows his tendencies. He understands where he wants to get to on the floor. He had to see what he was doing in practice. There's no doubt about it. So I'm looking at him getting the assignment tomorrow. And I think Tibbs may rely on that in order to try to slow down Devin Booker with someone who's been in-house with him. Devin Booker, we already know what he is. The mid-range god. All right, this guy, he's up there with DeRozan, okay? This man can just get to his spots on the floor. I know that he can get downhill. I know that he can shoot the three ball. He's also quite the facilitator. When he's rolling on all cylinders, he's a tough cover. But I'm looking at Bridges with, a slight, you know, mind game at this point. He's like, look, man, I know what you want to do. Let's see if I can handle you. All it's going to come down through for Bridges when it comes to matching up defensively is if he wants to be aggressive and get in Booker's grill and really throw him off his spots. So that's my key matchup for tomorrow's game. What do you think about that?
Yeah, no, I totally see it. And I think it's going to be interesting because obviously Bridges has had his kind of welcome back to Phoenix moment where he got the jitters out of the way. The Nets actually won that game in him and Cam Johnson's first game back in Phoenix. And it was funny because Devin Booker played great in that game. I think he dropped 34. Bridges wasn't bothering him, but the Nets got the win. The follow-up in Brooklyn, Booker didn't play very well. Bridges bothered him a little bit, but the Suns got the win. So I do think that's a good thing if you're a Knicks fan, is that Bridges has already got that emotional homecoming back to Phoenix out of the way last year. So he should be ready to go against his former team, against a guy like Book. I think it brings out the competitive fire in both of them. And that could either be something great for Devin Booker that helps him get back on track because he's going against a guy that, man, I used to play you in practice all the time. Here we go. Like, let's do this. Or it could be just exacerbating what we've seen from him over the last couple of weeks, which is
Mm.
struggling for the most part. So, like I said, I'm fascinated by this because I truly don't know what to expect from the Suns at this point. They're desperate for a win. And they're going up against opponent that, if you remember last year, Brunson came in, dropped 50 on the Suns. in a blowout win that kind of ruined Sean Marion's Ring of Honor ceremony last year.
The Matrix.
Yeah, and so I think they've got reason to remember that, especially with Bridges on the roster now and Campaign on the roster now. But they've been in a rut recently, so I really don't know what to expect.
I don't know what to expect either from Bridges too, man. I mean, the last, Bridges showed well against his other former team, the Brooklyn Nets, but the Nets are a different thing, and he did okay guarding Cam Thomas. I mean, OG did also take some of the responsibility of guarding him as well, putting a physical defender that has wingspan and isn't going to move an inch.
Mm.
I'm very curious to see how Bridges matches up tomorrow. And the thing about Bridges on the Knicks is that he offensively, they have to make sure that he's engaged from the beginning because he's a rhythm type player. Obviously much different than when he was out in Phoenix. He was just a 3-and-D player. Since leaving there, he's really developed, his own offensive creativity, his own offensive creation. And for him, that's very important just because I feel like if he's not involved early in games, he can just kind of go to the wayside and then just becomes that 3-and-D player that we see, and he has to be more than that for this team. Defensively is where it's been up and down. And like I said, Brooklyn, Wizards, you should be able to take those guys on.
Mm.
But tomorrow's going to be another tough matchup, man. And, he had a tough time guarding Levine, and Booker's right up there when it comes to offensive talent. So I have no idea how it's going to play out either, but obviously I'm going to support my guy. I'm going to support the Knicks, whatever it may be. And I'm hoping for the best. Now, let's get to the X Factor. All right.
Mm.
You mentioned Campaign. Who is my X Factor? All right. And these last two games, he's been shooting the cover off the ball, man. And I'm sure you are as aware as what Campaign can do more than anybody else watching him in Phoenix. He can check in and he can guy that can just demoralize the opposing team, especially when he's just hitting his threes and just get into the flow of the offense. And he's really been doing a solid job orchestrating, especially with the starting five. He's my X factor for tomorrow's game, just because not sure where McBride is at in recovering from some knee inflammation. Cam has now been essentially the lead guard when it usually is McBride. If I'm wondering if he's going to keep this good shooting streak going, and if he's going to be able to continue that solid playmaking that he has, because we know he could be an up and down player. So he's my X factor tomorrow's game because I feel like if he's in rhythm, man, the revenge tour is going to be on a whole other level if he's hitting shots. We already know what Campaign can do when he's just feeling it.
Yeah, no, that's a great pick, especially with McBride out again. I feel like Payne has that potential revenge game. He has been back in Phoenix since he left the Suns, obviously, but we saw with Philly last year, he's capable of going off. We've seen it here in Phoenix. That I'll never forget the Western Conference game. Everyone remembers the Valley-Oop, but a lot of people forget that if it wasn't for Campaign dropping, I think it was 29 points in that game, filling in for Chris Paul, the Suns might not even get to that game in a pivotal Western Conference Finals game. So this is a guy that is comfortable in this gym, that's comfortable stepping up, that is comfortable getting hot. But he can also get a little bit cold as well and be a little bit streaky. So he's a great pick in terms of the X factor because if he does come in and play that way, the Suns right now don't have the depth to necessarily match something like that, I don't think. But if he doesn't, then the margin for error gets a little bit slimmer, and you rely a lot on that starting five, like we talked about.
For sure. Who's your X factor for tomorrow's game?
Oh boy, for the Suns, I would probably say it's Royce O'Neal. I feel like he was shooting the skin off the ball for the first 9 games of the season, and then not so coincidentally, when Kevin Durant went out, his shooting, he's always kind of been a streaky shooter. If you look at his career, like even last year, month to month, it was just, 39%, then down to 32%. Like it was very streaky. He's been that to start the season. They need him to get out of his rut that he's been in recently, because he's been shooting like 23% from three over the last 6 games, and that's just not going to cut it for a guy who in the first 9 games was actually their leader in plus minus. He was the only player that when he was off the court, the Suns were a negative, which spoke to how good he was when he was on the court. So he's a guy that they need to get back on track. And against this Knicks team with the wings that they have, I think he's going to get ample opportunity to do so.
All right, Royce O'Neal being your X factor for tomorrow's matchup, and rightfully so, man. Like I feel like that wasn't he kind of like outside of like the big three that you have in Phoenix, like he was essentially like your big signing almost, wasn't he?
He was a big re-signing. Yeah, they were able to extend him. Him and Grayson Allen, they extended Grayson before the season ended, and then they extended Royce over the summer. But yeah, he was the guy that you knew they were going to re-sign because they couldn't afford to let him leave. They wouldn't have been able to replace his salary on the open market, so they needed to keep him. They overpaid a little bit to keep him here. But he was really good for the Suns last year when he first came here and kind of got thrown in the mix mid-season. And he was really good to start the season when they were whole. I think it's when you start losing guys left and right and asking certain role players to step up into roles that maybe they're not uh, capable of filling. I think that's when we've seen the struggles kind of come back.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. And there you have it, ladies and gents. Joe, before I let you out of here, let's get some predictions. What do you think happens in tomorrow's game between the Knicks and the Knicks and the Suns?
Yeah, I'm gonna say Knicks by two in this one. I think the Suns are in a bad place. I don't think they have the horses right now, and I think the Knicks are starting to put things together and are just a tough matchup in terms of the size that they bring to the table and the different options they'll be able to throw at Booker. So I think it's going to be a close one. I think the Suns are going to fight because, like I said, they are desperate for a win. They're desperate to get back on track. But ultimately, I don't know that they have an answer for Jalen Brunson. We've seen that recently as well. And I think Karl Anthony Towns presents matchup problems for them as well.
All right. I'm going with the Knicks as well for tomorrow, and partially because of the Karl Anthony Towns matchup problems. I think points in the paint is going to be a big thing. This team has been very efficient getting downhill. And it's to me, it's going to come down to the Suns' 3-point defense. If you guys can limit the amount of attempts, and that's really been like something that's been a trend for the Knicks, that if you can force the Knicks just to play an inside game and limit their 3-point shooting, you're going to have a good chance. So that's going to be another factor to tune into for tomorrow. If the Knicks are going to be able to not only hit their shots, but if they can create that separation too to get some off. Gerald, I appreciate you coming through, man. As always, please let the listeners know where they can follow you. And if you got any work that's up and coming, we should be on the lookout for.
Yeah, absolutely. You can follow me on Twitter at Gerald Bourget. You can read my work at gophnx.com. Just wrote an article today about the Sun skid. So if you are interested in seeing what's been going on with this team, the other perspective, I covered that in full detail over at gophnx.com. And then we do our daily podcast, the PHNX Suns podcast, 5 days a week. And you can get that wherever you get your podcasts.
Appreciate you once again, Gerald, for coming through. And make sure to give Gerald a follow, man. He does great work covering the Phoenix Suns. So make sure to go tap in. I know a lot of you all love the NBA out there, so make sure to give him a follow and make sure to go support his work. But before you leave, make sure to support us too. Make sure to hit that thumbs up button for your boys. Make sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so. Make sure to support our sponsor, Underdog Fantasy. Use that promo code KFTV to get up to $1,000 in instant bonus cash and a free pick. And shout out to all of Knicks Nation who joined us tonight. Shout out to everyone tuning in live. First and foremost, shout out to all the mods, all right? And shout out to the chief mod in operation, my guy TM in here, doing the Lord's work, throwing out the promotions, throwing out the links so that everyone can go follow everybody here. Shout out to you, my guy, and keeping the chat involved and engaged. Shout out to Nostalgic Nick for being a franchise channel member. Shout out to Felix Baldomero for being a franchise channel member as well. G5 Weez, I see you in here too. Who else we got in here? John Talento, shout out to you for being a franchise channel member. Shout out to Rare Edition for being a franchise channel member as well, man. Appreciate all you guys coming through and supporting Game of the Week preview as always. We got Eric B. Shout out to you, man, for being a franchise channel member. Hey, G7 Full never misses a show. What up to you? Arthur, shout out to you as well, my man. Appreciate everyone in Knicks Nation tuning in and staying involved and engaged. Make sure to tune in tomorrow for KFTV post game, and I'm sure we got play-by-play. CK2K has been doing phenomenal work, so if you want to catch play-by-play, CK2K always doing the damn thing. Make sure to support him too, and make sure to tune into post game live tomorrow after the Knicks face the Phoenix Suns. All right, everybody, we out.